Can a small, landlocked nation light up an entire continent? That question, once dismissed as political poetry, has now become a serious proposition, echoing from Ouagadougou to the heart of West Africa. In 2023, President Ibrahim Traoré announced what would soon be recognized as one of the most audacious infrastructure projects in African history, a $800 billion master plan to transform Burkina Faso into the renewable energy capital of the Sahel. At first, the world treated it as another dream, another bold speech that would fade with the desert wind. But 3 years later, Phase 1 of the project is in full motion, and the results are no longer theoretical. The barren lands of the Central Plateau now host vast solar fields stretching to the horizon. Transmission towers rise from the sand like metallic trees. In villages that once depended on candlelight, children now do their homework under electric bulbs powered by Burkina's own sun. This is not merely a power project, it is a statement of independence. Traoré has said repeatedly that true sovereignty begins when a nation can power itself. For decades, Burkina Faso imported both fuel and electricity. Its economy flickered between darkness and dependence. Now it aims to export light. The Sahel Power Initiative, as it's officially named, is not just about energy. It's about rewriting the story of a continent long defined by scarcity. Traoré's government sees this as a path from survival to leadership, from isolation to integration. In his own words, "We cannot wait for the world to bring us light. We must build our own dawn." And with that vision, Burkina Faso's $800 billion dream began a plan to power not only its people, but all of West Africa. The foundation of every great revolution is crisis. For Burkina Faso, that crisis came between 2022 and 2023, when rolling blackouts swept across the country. Hospitals shut down operating rooms. Water pumps stopped in entire provinces. Over 60% of rural areas were left in total darkness for weeks at a time. But in this darkness, a new vision began to take shape. Ibrahim Traoré, then a young military leader facing both insurgency and economic collapse, realized that the battle for sovereignty could not be won with weapons alone. It had to begin with electricity. That idea became the birth of a doctrine: energy sovereignty. It was simple yet radical. Burkina Faso must learn to power itself by itself. The president often reminded his ministers that energy was not just a technical issue, but a political weapon. A nation that imports its light can never claim independence. Burkina Faso sits under one of the brightest skies in the world, more than 2,000 hours of sunshine every year, yet it remained among the least electrified nations on the continent. For Traoré, that paradox was intolerable. Inspired by Egypt's Desert Power Project and Morocco's Green Corridor, he challenged his government to imagine something even greater: a continental solar belt that could connect the Sahel and make Africa's sun its greatest export. The concept was not born in Paris or Washington, but in Ouagadougou, inside a small war cabinet that later transformed into an energy council. There, soldiers, engineers, and economists gathered to draft what would become the blueprint of the Sahel Power Initiative. It was an act of defiance, a message that the country once dismissed as too poor to lead was now ready to build what others deemed impossible. As one Burkinabe engineer put it, "We have no sea, but we have the sun." And that's an ocean of power waiting to be used. The origins of the vision, therefore, were not born in luxury, but in necessity, courage, and the relentless will to turn crisis into creation. The Sahel Power Initiative is not a single project. It is an entire national transformation plan stretching across 15 years and 3 decisive phases. Phase 1, 2023-2028, building the foundations. This first phase focuses on establishing 5 major solar clusters, each designed to produce 10 gigawatts of power, positioned across strategic regions: Ouagadougou, Bobo-Dioulasso, Kayadori, and Fada Ngourma. Along the Volta River basin, 3 new micro-hydroelectric dams are being constructed to provide backup generation during low sunlight months. And in the industrial zone, east of the capital, Burkina Faso's first lithium battery plant began trial production in mid-2025. Together, these early facilities already generate enough energy to supply nearly 500,000 households, an achievement unthinkable only a few years ago. Phase 2, 2028-2033, connecting the region. During this stage, the project will expand beyond national borders through the Trans-Sahel Energy Corridor, a 2,000-kilometer high-voltage transmission line linking Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, and Ghana. This corridor will form the energy backbone of the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, transforming their geographic proximity into a shared grid and shared destiny. Phase 3, 2033-2038, exporting the future. The final decade will mark Burkina Faso's transition from energy importer to regional exporter, capable of selling clean electricity across West Africa. This will be the era when the nation no longer trades only gold, but sunlight. At its core, the blueprint rests on 4 strategic pillars. The Sahel Solar Grid, an interconnected solar system producing up to 80 gigawatts, making it the largest in Africa. 2. The Hydro Nexus, 15 small and mid-sized dams bringing both electricity and water to over 50 million people in the Sahel zone. 3. Lithium storage and battery plants, a chain of local factories ensuring the country can store its own energy rather than exporting raw materials. 4. The Trans-Sahel Transmission Line, a cross-border infrastructure designed to unify West Africa through energy trade and shared stability. As of today, 18% of Phase 1 is complete. The government reports that the new solar fields are already feeding 15% more power into the national grid than all previous systems combined. From above, these solar installations look like massive mirrors glimmering across the desert symbols of what Burkina Faso has become, a nation that turns its heat into hope. And perhaps for the first time in history, the sun over the Sahel no longer represents drought, but destiny. A project of this scale demands more than ambition, it demands a coalition. Financing the $800 billion Sahel Power Initiative is not the work of a single government but a strategic alliance of new global powers, each seeing in Burkina Faso a testing ground for a new multipolar order. The structure of the financing reflects this shift. According to official documents from the Ministry of Economy, the plan is divided into multi-source contributions over 15 years, $300 billion from the BRICS Development Bank, allocated as long-term infrastructure and technology loans. $120 billion from the UAE Green Fund, dedicated to renewable energy clusters and solar manufacturing facilities. $80 billion from the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, to strengthen regional grids. $50 billion raised through public-private partnerships within Burkina Faso, primarily from domestic mining revenues and sovereign bonds. Additional $250 billion in direct investments and equipment support from Russia, China, India, and Brazil, each taking a role aligned with their industrial strengths. Russia contributes to energy storage and smart grid technologies. China leads construction in solar panel and lithium processing plants. India provides digital monitoring systems and rural electrification expertise. Brazil assists in developing bioenergy and agricultural integration zones. This financial and technical architecture marks a clear geopolitical turning point. For decades, energy aid in Africa flowed through Western institutions, IMF, World Bank, or the French Development Agency, each tied to restrictive conditions. Now, Burkina Faso's funding model operates through mutual investment, not dependency. Critically, the Burkinabe government maintains 51% domestic ownership of all key infrastructure. That clause, written personally into the contract by Traoré's Economic Council, ensures that the grid, the dams, and the battery plants remain under Burkina Faso's sovereign control. Analysts describe this as a new model of post-colonial development, a partnership without surrender, where global South nations invest in one another rather than compete for foreign approval. And for Traoré, the message is unmistakable. We will work with those who respect us, not those who own us. This $800 billion network is not just an energy project. It is a geopolitical map of a new Africa, one connected not by colonial borders, but by shared electricity lines, shared ambition, and shared strength. The economic tremors of the Sahel Power Initiative are already being felt, not in abstract numbers, but in the rhythm of daily life across Burkina Faso. In less than 3 years, over 2 million jobs have been created from solar panel assembly lines in Ouagadougou to maintenance crews patrolling the desert grids. Rural economies once stagnant are showing their first signs of sustained growth. Farmers in Dori and Kaya can now irrigate crops using electric pumps powered by nearby solar hubs. Clinics in Bobo Dioulasso, which once relied on noisy diesel generators, now operate through the night on clean energy. The International Energy Agency estimates that access to electricity can increase local productivity by up to 30% in the first 5 years. If the projections hold, Burkina Faso's GDP could rise by 4.5% annually through the 2030s, transforming the country from one of West Africa's poorest economies into a rising industrial power. But the implications extend far beyond economics. In geopolitical terms, this project represents a quiet revolution, one that shifts the balance of power in the Sahel. For decades, energy scarcity has been a silent driver of conflict. When the grid fails, governance fails. When lights go out, insurgency thrives. By electrifying rural zones and border regions, Burkina Faso is not only illuminating homes, it is cutting off oxygen to the very networks that thrive on chaos. Within the Alliance of Sahel States, AES Burkina Faso's leadership is becoming central. The planned Trans-Sahel Energy Corridor will supply both Niger and Mali, binding the three nations with a shared energy lifeline that transcends politics. It's energy diplomacy, at its most strategic, replacing dependence on foreign bases with inter-African cooperation. Globally, Burkina Faso's rise as a renewable power producer challenges the long-standing narrative of African dependency. If successful, the Sahel could become the green Gulf of the 21st century, not defined by oil, but by sunlight. Even major powers are beginning to take notice. In European capitals, think tanks debate how to respond to a West Africa no longer begging for energy contracts, but offering them. Meanwhile, across the BRICS nations, Burkina Faso is hailed as a symbol of the Global South's new industrial age, proof that sovereignty can be built not just with soldiers, but with solar panels. The true impact of this $800 billion initiative, however, lies in something deeper than data. It is psychological. For the first time in generations, the Burkinabe people see their nation not as a victim of global systems, but as a builder of them. And that kind of belief, once ignited, spreads faster than any current on a wire. No revolution comes without resistance, and the Sahel Power Initiative is no exception. Behind every promise of progress lies a web of risk, financial, logistical, and geopolitical. The first challenge is technical capacity. Burkina Faso's education system, though improving, still struggles to produce enough engineers, electricians, and renewable energy specialists to sustain such a vast infrastructure. As of 2025, fewer than 4,000 certified technicians are available nationwide, a fraction of what will be required once the project reaches full scale. The government has begun new training programs in collaboration with universities in India and Brazil, but it will take years before a skilled workforce can replace foreign contractors. The second challenge is financial volatility. Even with BRICS backing an $800 billion project, represents more than 4 times the combined GDP of the alliance of Sahel states. Any economic downturn change in global energy prices or diplomatic rift could freeze parts of the funding pipeline. Critics argue that without strong financial governance, the initiative could risk turning from a symbol of independence into a burden of debt. The third and perhaps most immediate challenge is security. The northern provinces remain vulnerable to militant attacks. Solar installations seen as symbols of state power have become targets for sabotage. To counter this, the Burkina Faso army has deployed rapid reaction units to secure the corridors and substations. But protection costs now consume nearly 8% of the project's annual budget. Environmental factors pose another long-term threat. The Sahel is one of the harshest climates on Earth. Sandstorms, heat fluctuations, and corrosion shorten the lifespan of equipment and increase maintenance costs. Without localized production of spare parts, dependence on imports could undercut the goal of sovereignty. Finally, there is the issue of international perception. Some Western observers question whether Traoré's growing control over strategic industries, from mining to energy, could lead to over-centralization of power. Human rights organizations warn that militarized protection of infrastructure must not come at the cost of civil freedoms. And yet, despite these challenges, progress continues. By late 2025, 3 of the 5 solar clusters are operational, and grid reliability in central Burkina Faso has improved by nearly 40% compared to 2022 levels. It's not perfection, but it's progress. And in the Sahel, progress itself is a victory. From the heart of the Sahel, where the earth once cracked with drought and despair, a new light is rising, not the light of foreign aid or imported power, but one born from African soil, African hands, and African will. In less than 5 years, Burkina Faso has begun to redefine what leadership means on the continent. Under the blazing sun of the desert, the turbines turn, the panels shimmer, and the hum of new electricity spreads like a heartbeat through villages and cities that once lived in silence. What began as an $800 billion dream is now a visible transformation, a nation turning sunlight into sovereignty. From the military command post that secured its borders to the engineers wiring its future, the country has built something few thought possible, an economy that no longer looks outward for permission to grow. The symbolism is powerful. A landlocked nation long trapped by geography and poverty is now becoming land-linked through energy diplomacy, connecting West Africa by power lines rather than by colonial maps. The Sahel Power Initiative has become more than a project. It is a philosophy. It tells every African nation that development need not wait for charity, and that independence, once political, can now be technological. As Traoré said in one of his most striking speeches, Africa's gold lies not beneath our feet, but above our heads in the light that visits us every morning. That line has now become prophetic. Across Ouagadougou and Bobo Dioulasso, you can see it, the first signs of a nation no longer living in the shadow of others. The road ahead remains long, the risks immense, but the direction is clear. Burkina Faso is not waiting for the world to bring light to Africa. It is preparing to become the light itself.